as librarians, they are custodians of history to a large extent, and of the journalism that's the current history, the first draft of history that they say. You have a lot of those books, and now, of course, the internet is in the library. So, which means the entire output of WikiLeaks so far. And my message to begin with was that the situation today is remarkably similar to the one that the country was facing, or the president was facing, 40 years ago when the Pentagon Papers, and 42 years ago and before that, namely a question of what to do with respect to an unwinnable war that we were heavily involved in. I'm speaking primarily of Afghanistan now, but a number of other wars that we really are involved in, whether the president calls them wars or not, in Iraq, where I think, by the way, fighting may well expand again within the next year, Pakistan, Yemen, and other places where we really are involved in hostilities with drones and other respects. And the question is whether to extricate ourselves in one way or another, unilaterally or negotiation, from one or more of those wars, whether to expand them markedly, as the military is advising in some cases, or whether to do what president after president did in Vietnam and President Obama is choosing right now, and that is essentially to prolong the war, to keep it from ending while he is in office, which might expose him to charges of being weak, unmanly, even foreign in his case, but an appeaser, and a man who had chosen to lose a war that the military said was unwinnable. And however foolish that promise was of winnability, and however foolish and unrealistic the charges are, being a loser and a quitter and weak, the president doesn't want to hear them. And typically in Vietnam, and I believe now, the assumption, the hypothesis that the history is very similar now, reenacting, presidents prefer to send men and women now to die and to kill, rather than be called names themselves, rather than risk re-election, rather than risk their place in history. And that's a very typical choice, cynical as that may sound, by presidents in the past. I don't think that President Obama is worse or different from the others, but that's not a justifiable cause. That's not a legitimate reason, and it's practically the only reason that we are still involved with over 100,000 troops and 100,000 mercenaries in Afghanistan right now. It's not good enough.
It often seems to me when I was listening to you talk that the question that doesn't seem to get asked in cases like Afghanistan, as it wasn't asked, it seems to me, in Vietnam, is what would a win look like?
Well, actually, a win is not that hard to define. It's just impossible to achieve. My boss, John McNaughton in Vietnam, is in the Pentagon Papers defining in some detail what a win in Vietnam would be like, and claiming at that time that that was our objective. Namely, that take Vietnam now, all northern troops in South Vietnam would go back to the north and take with them the Southerners, this is getting into history here, but the Southerners who had gone north after Geneva in '54 and then come back, so-called regroupees. But all people under the command of the communist leadership of the resistance there should go back to North Vietnam. The remaining people, the Southern guerrillas, let's say, should lay down their arms and do it visibly, not just bury them, but give in their arms or amalgamate and accept the discipline of the South Vietnamese troops that we supplied and trained and funded and everything else. You could define conditions just like that in Afghanistan.